welcome to ThinkTech. We are raising public awareness about energy, technology, globalism, and diversification every day. This show is Center Stage. I'm your host, Donna Blanchard, very proud Managing Director of Kumukuhua Theater. We're coming to you live from downtown Honolulu in Pioneer Plaza, very near Kumukuhua Theater. We stream our shows every weekday from 1 to 5 p.m. on Spreaker.com and Ustream.tv. And if you would ever like to be a guest in our downtown studio for any of our shows, just email jay@thinktechhawaii.com and we will hook you up. Today I am talking with Dana Hankins. She is a film producer. She was the producer on the indie film Under the Blood Red Sun, the story that you know from Graham/Sandy Salisbury. And she's also the executive producer of the short festival film, The Fishing Club, which just premiered at the Hawaii International Film Festival this weekend. Thank you so much for being here, Dana.
Thank you for asking me.
You know, my good friend and office manager at Kumukuhua Theater, Will Kahele, is the person who introduced me to you, and you've been so wonderful about helping me score interviews with Sandy and Tim Savage, the director of Under the Blood Red Sun, and then Dave Rosen, director of The Fishing Club. I'm so happy to have you here because your work is so. I have a lot of questions for you, and I'm kind of in the business, so I'm sure there's a lot of ground we can cover that will be of great interest to a lot of people. First of all, let's talk about your involvement in the Fishing Club. Is your most well, it's not really your most current project because it's all opened.
It actually shot before Under the Blood Red Sun, but it's the one that we premiered actually last night, so at HIF. So it's the most recent, just in terms of screening.
Oh yeah. And that sold out one of its.
Yes, and then it screens again. I believe it's on Friday over at Coco Marina. So there's another Hawaii short section. I'm not sure if that's sold out or not.
That one is sold out. Yeah, excellent. I think that one sold out first, so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. But we're proud to be part of the program. There are 4 other films, great Hawaii filmmakers out there. Really pleased to see their material as well.
Oh yeah. And you're still doing some work on Under the Blood Red Sun?
Yes, we are preparing a DVD and a Blu-ray release. We're making some small picture changes. There's a little bit of tinkering that we get to do even after we've actually released the film.
Oh.
Just because we're not making multiple prints and shipping them to theaters. We are a digital release only, internet and other forms. So those last-minute changes we could make, and it allows us to refresh as necessary, either picture or sound or credits, music. There's a little bit of tinkering we can make now that we've had our premiere and audience have seen it and have responded.
What a luxury.
It is. Really enjoying it.
Is it? Yeah, I bet. Is it also a little bit, well, let me explain my question here. I am a theater artist primarily, and you have a deadline, and you're going to do it, and then you're done when you're done. When I started painting, I found that I don't know how to stop, and I will sometimes have paintings on my walls, and I'll be sitting there and for some reason look at it and say, oh, I should have put more yellow in there, and I'll add a little more yellow. So when is your drop dead?
Yeah, I think we definitely get to the point where we know it's time to stop. And I should explain that these revisions that we're making are relatively minor. They come out of the first, let's say, week of screenings where we were in front of an audience. We had a feel for what was working, what might be a little long. Audience is a little restless. We can go back in and make some small changes. But I don't foresee doing this every month. I think that this is really just the post-premiere tinkering, and then that will put the end to it. Okay. The art will be finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, still a little bit of work going on there. And then, are you working on any other projects currently?
No. I've been asked repeatedly about whether I would follow Under the Blood Red Sun with one of Graham Salisbury's or Sandy's other books. While I have my eyes set on them and they're in various stages of either screenplay or revisions, I'm not yet ready to move forward on anything until Under the Blood Red Sun has, let's say, had its first year of, if I could refer to its first year of birth. I mean, it's almost like birthing a child, and at some point needing to nurture it along for that first year.
Gotcha.
So between the Blu-ray and the DVD, we have community-based screenings that are coming up for festivals and museums and institutions and schools and libraries. With the book having been in middle school reading curriculum for the last 20 years, there are quite a few interested parties who would like to now show the movie adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
So that will take us, I think, through the next year just to make sure we're settled. We're out there and we're settled.
Okay. Such a wonderful opportunity to combine art and education and just a study of problem solving and processing that the young man in the film goes through.
Yeah, very much so. And it's unique for me only in that I've never worked in, let's say, this middle school range, grades 4 to 8. And after decades of experience producing, there has been nothing better than being able to share such an important story, at some point provide kids in that age range who might be looking for some role models, some heroes, some further understanding of who they are and their place in the world, and to find that with a piece of material like Under the Blood Red Sun and then its adaptation, we're able to provide some direction as well as fabulous entertainment. So for me, very, very rewarding.
You should be very proud of that work too.
Thank you. That I am.
So let's get into that, because you made that happen. You helped make that happen.
Yes.
So let's see, where do I want to begin? Your actually home is in Portland.
It is now, yes.
But you started with this project back when you lived here on the
Yes.
island. And can you talk about the birth, of the real, the inception of
Sure. I had first moved to the islands about 22 years ago and was interested in reading stories about the islands that weren't necessarily documentary or oral history, which was much of what I was seeing at the time. And I should clarify that the documentaries or the oral history were film-based, movie-based, and there were a number of books that had fiction and nonfiction and poetry and local Hawaii writing, but I was really looking for something that would allow me to come off of what I had been doing in LA at the time, which was working in fiction and in feature material. Having read a number of Hawaii authors, including Graham's work or Sandy's work, I had approached him originally for a book of short stories called Blue Skin of the Sea that's set on the Big Island, and again about a couple of young boys growing up. Wasn't quite sure I could find the threads to put those short stories together into a longer form piece, but having reached out to Sandy, he had asked about Under the Blood Red Sun, had shared with me how widespread the audience was, but I was daunted by the time period, daunted by working with a 13-year-old boy who's in every single scene of the book and therefore would be in every single scene of the movie. And I kind of, pushed it aside and pursued a number of other projects here. And at some point just kind of came back around to what did I really want to be doing, what was going to be the next project. And after 3 failed attempts at getting that off the ground, I think just due to the way in which we're making movies nowadays, very different than before. Cameras are smaller. You're able to press a few buttons with the kind of mastering of picture and sound and, in a way, the art that you weren't able to do before, solo. You had to go to an outside vendor in a big house and change color or mix sound, and all of those things now are at our disposal. So a combination of those things allowed us to bring the budget for the movie down, as well as after 20 years, I had reached out to the community, all of whom came forward to assist in the making of this movie. And all of those pieces coming together, those puzzle pieces, allowed us to finally press go. Believe it or not, our first day of filming was a year ago yesterday. So today is actually a very emotional day, I think, for all of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, a lot of thought and time went into it prior to that,
Yes.
but to have it already released within a year of your
Yes,
first... Wow.
very happy and proud, but I mean, it did mean that I had read it, 20 years ago and had kind of moved it from pile to pile. And then I think at some point, as Sandy will tell you, maybe 8 years ago, he adapted the screenplay, and then we, moved a few things around, and we've added some new scenes that he now wishes he was in that were in the book. So we've done quite a bit of rearranging, and all of those things took this, the period of time to finally get to a year ago yesterday. So, yeah.
So, you moved, can we get into a little more detail about you moved
Sure.
it from pile to pile, some changes were made, but when it actually came to, okay, we're going to jump in and do this, what are the first steps that you go through? Support?
Yeah, I think though for this, with a 13-year-old boy, as the main character, it really was casting Tomi Nakaji, which is his name. And I think at some point, while the support, the cast, the crew, the organizations that stepped forward, finding the period props, the period wardrobe, I don't mean to make light of it. All those things are certainly important pieces of the puzzle, but it's the performance. I mean, for us, very similar as it is to you on the stage, it's really all about that performance. And we needed to make sure that the 13-year-old boy, who's such a central figure to the story for so many reasons, being in all of the scenes, watching his character arc, his progression, all of the things he goes through, we really needed to hang that role on someone's shoulders who could play that. And in finding Kyler Sakamoto, accidentally in a way, I watched him on the fishing club where he had a very small role, but watching him, staring at him, just kind of, approaching his parents, trying to get a feel for him, the slow bulb went off, and I realized that I was looking at our Tomi Nakaji. I was looking at the crucial element for making Under the Blood Red Sun. And then from auditions and a few more meetings and a better understanding, that was really the most important piece. So it was one thing to, let's say, move the book or the screenplays in need of revision from pile to pile, which was just busy work. It really came down to that fate of finding Kyler and knowing that between the talent, the look, the facial expression, in some way it's a combination of acting and reacting that we had found our lead character, our Tomi Nakaji.
He really was awesome.
He is, thank you.
So do you have your financial backing all in place before you go to look for him, or do you need him and then you worry about that?
Yeah, the 3 failed attempts that I mentioned were really due to having larger sized budgets and trying to find the finances to make the movie. Years ago, I had envisioned it as a larger sized theatrical film, one which would have played in movie theaters. But at some point, with where the business and the business of entertainment is now, understanding more clearly that I was in it would be awkward to be in competition with the kind of movies that are currently in theaters. And I would just say between, forgive me, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, the fairies, the Harry Potters, the special effects, I really had no business being in a movie theater. It's a much more personal story. It's his personal journey. I needed to be in a handheld device that, kids between the ages of 8 and 15 are watching. And that allowed us to start to revisit the budget, revisit what we could do ourselves, as I mentioned before, due to technology. And with that, the budget became astronomically smaller, allowing us to move forward. So the finances were certainly a big part of it, but I would have to say that I'm not sure I've ever been involved in a project where the finances are all in place, they're sitting in a bank, and then you press go. I think at some point you're just hoping that that synergy of all of those things that are coming together, and they're aided certainly by intuition, your gut feeling at this age with all the work that I've done, you have a gut feeling that things are coming together at a certain way at a certain pace. So when you're ready to press go, they will merge, and it certainly happened with Under the Blood Red Sun. Wow. So.
That sounds kind of intense,
yes.
Danna. I always imagined that you get your backers, you get the money in the bank, and you say,
in a perfect world,
you put together your budget. This is what I need.
In a perfect world.
Okay, so that doesn't happen that often, and you've worked on some pretty large projects. I stalked you just briefly.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. The Tempest.
Yes.
What is this? True Love and Mimosa Tea.
Yes.
The Lemon Tree, Billiards House, Picture Bride, Bird on a Wire, Stakeout, Short Circuit, American Flyers, War Games.
Yes.
One of my favorite movies ever.
Thank you.
And you were the producer on all of these projects?
No, I am an associate producer on some, a production supervisor on some, and a producer on some.
Oh, okay.
So I think at some point, I think it's fair to say, with a job working for a film director in LA on the day that I finished college so many years ago, it was a great opportunity to understand the production side of things. It was a great opportunity to understand and develop the creative side of things. Those years of reading, 10, 12 screenplays a weekend and needing to do coverage and, very similar to what you do in the theater, have a different understanding of character and drama and character arcs and acts, etc. And then certainly the financial side of producing came out a little bit from the studio pictures that you've mentioned, but much more so when I moved here and had to take on independent films that meant a lot to me. It was less than about the financial side, having a studio backing and then just being handed funds that you argue over every dime and dollar for, but those funds are there, versus the labors of love, starting with Picture Bride. So those are very different, it's a different skill set for a producer or production supervisor, but I think over the years, I'm not sure I would want to give up either the experience that I have, let's say, running a set, or the experience I have understanding a budget and a schedule and defending those on behalf of the creative involved. So they're all, to me, they're all intricately involved, and I'm not sure that I'd be able to give up one or the other.
So if I'm understanding correctly, here in the Hawaii market, so it's a little smaller, you're wearing more hats, or you're wearing a larger hat as the producer?
Yes, I think that anyone here, living and wanting to work here in the islands, and certainly on stories of great cultural significance here, you do have to wear more hats, and at the same time your experience, I think, needs to be a little bit broader range, so that at any point in time you can either, at least for me, I mean, I show up on set much to the dismay sometimes of the cast and crew, and it's almost being a little bit like Sybil. So it's, where do we park the car? Over there. We forgot this, what should we do? What time is lunch coming? Where is the makeup?
Oh, wow.
It is, can I have a check for? Can we rehearse this scene again? Where do I park, where are we putting the camera? When's the rehearsal? So at some point it really is being able to live and breathe that project, whatever it is, whether it's a commercial or whether it's a feature, and do my best either to answer those questions or know exactly who I can delegate to, so those questions can be answered very quickly.
What a comfort that must be for
Yes.
people to have one person that you can go to.
I think at times yes, and I think at times it's a difficult, people work well when they're collaborating, and there are a number of people that, it can't be all so centered. So I think it just depends on which portion of it. I think maybe some of the matter-of-fact, moving some puzzle pieces around is easy, but the creative, you want to be collaborating with as many people as possible, because it's only from that kind of synergy that you get the best, the best art.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is Center Stage. I'm Donna Blanchard, and talking with Dana Hankins, producer of many films, and we will be right back.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. One of the things I love being, however, is the host of the weekly program on ThinkTech Hawaii called Ehana Kako, which means let's work together. I get to interview movers and shakers in our town and across the world so that you and I together can learn and to grow. Please join me every Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. or watch us on the recording, www.thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and Ehana Kako. Let's work together.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. I am your host, Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhui Theater. We're coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, and I am talking with film producer Dana Hankins. Okay, so what brought you had been working in LA. As soon as you got out of school, you started working on some pretty big projects.
Yes.
And then what? What brought you here?
Yeah, my husband is retired Navy now, so it was actually my husband who brought us here, and I had twin 2-year-old daughters when we arrived in the islands. Through those early years, I was trying to figure out whether there was an opportunity to work in fiction filmmaking. The projects you mentioned earlier, which are precursors in a way to the Fishing Club, the Lemon Tree Billiards House, Dancing with the Longbone, True Love and Mimosa Tea, are all short stories which were written for Honolulu Magazine 15 years ago when they had a fiction writing contest.
Oh.
And I had reached out to the magazine, having read one that I really liked. I reached out to the late John Heckathorn and to Cam Napier, asking to read boxes of their stories to see if I could come up with a series of short stories that were set in Hawaii, very much about the character, the lives that we lead, the things that we believe here, a little bit of magical realism, certainly including pigeon, just very, very much our daily lives. And through those boxes of stories, I picked a few, and the fourth would be the fishing club. So my early years, let's just say, here were spent on those short stories. I was honored to be asked to line produce Picture Bride, which was a very important project for me at that time, really understanding the history and the culture of the islands in a way that I would have never been able to investigate having just arrived. It was the best way to understand the culture, the history, the people, in a way the characters as well. And then in between all of that, taking on commercial projects, so taking on shooting commercials, local, national, international, and working very closely with the film offices on all of those things. So again, a different hat depending upon which day it is and what project I'm working on.
Yeah. I just have to tell you, last season we did the show Fishing for Wives by Ed Sakamoto, and I looked at your film for part of my research.
Thank you.
The concept was new to me. It's such a beautiful, graceful film.
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased to be a part of it. And we had an unusual circumstance that I've shared with a few people, and I'll try to keep it short here. In working on Picture Bride, the writer-director had passed at a young age, and her name is Kaio Hata. And I was honored to be asked, new to the islands, Howley, honored to be asked to line produce for a very creative, very talented Japanese-American female woman director, unbelievable. And when we were casting Under the Blood Red Sun, we were casting for the role of Kimi Nakaji, the sister of Tomi Nakaji. We bring in young girls for an audition. And at some point, I remember the busy work. Tim Savage, the director, is auditioning, or he's actually preparing a young girl, Mina Kahara, for the audition. And as he's chatting with her, do you know why you're here today? Who's the doll in your hands? Kind of, let me warm you up so you give us the best audition possible. He said something to her, and she responded, oh, I know I'm here for a movie. My auntie directed a movie. And I remember my head just swiveled because I couldn't imagine who she could be talking about. And he must have said to her, who is your auntie? And then she said, Kaio Hata, Picture Bride. Oh. Sorry, and I just remember I turned around, I know. I looked at her, I looked at her mom who was in the room, I just burst into tears. Oh, it was probably one of those moments that you can't, you can't duplicate. I'm sure we scared poor Mina, because at some point she just answered with her aunt's name, and the next thing you know, she's got two adults in tears in the room.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But I think at some point, not only did she nail the audition, but as you listen to everyone talk about, I mean, we were blessed with such terrific talent in Under the Blood Red Sun, but starting with Mina, at 7 years old, being able to carry her own with our fabulous cast. And at some point, she's just a foundational member at that young age that we all kind of revolved around. So it was really a magical moment.
She was a doll.
Yes.
She was a doll in the film. Thank you for sharing that story. I got goosebumps all the way up to my face. That's big. Can you explain line producer versus executive producer?
Sure, and you definitely will not be getting chicken skin on that. So I think at some point, typically, because every project is very different, I think typically an executive producer nowadays comes on board to kind of stamp the production, give it its mantle of respectability, give it some general and big direction. They come on board because they have funding, and they may not be involved in the intimacy of the production, but the producer credit is given out to a number of people who come on board. Oftentimes in LA, you do see that if an actor has a manager or an agent or a production company, they might not be intimately involved in the movie that you're working on, but they receive an executive producer credit. Typically, a producer credit is someone who is merging the creative side, supervising the production side of schedules and budgets and things like that, but maybe not with a fine-tooth comb, maybe not with a sharpened pencil. Okay. And the producer oftentimes is the one who has to mediate with, let's say, a studio or with the investors. At the same time, they're dealing with the project creatively. They may have gotten all of the elements involved to actually launch the project. The line producer, the nicest way I think I can say this is that they're the ones who have their accolade on the line, in that everything comes through them, meaning have we made our day? Have we shot what we were supposed to? Did we complete that scene? Why did we? Why didn't we? What can we do better? What can we do faster? So many of the, you know, it's almost like being an air traffic controller. Everything kind of comes through that line producer, that production supervisor, and they're responsible for making the schedule, making the budget, making sure all the things show up on the day. And then from that point on, you have a production, on many projects, you have a production manager who might be taking segments of a movie. I mean, certainly on big budget films nowadays, because there are so many elements involved in between the visual effects and between second units that are out there shooting waterfalls and helicopters and underwater sequences, you tend to drop those into separate units because they require full-on time and attention. So it's through all of those producer, exec producer, line producer, supervising producer, coordinating producer, all of those people come forward. But I would just caution anyone listening to this explanation, each project is different. So we all kind of maneuver around into whatever makes sense for that specific project.
Gotcha.
We wear a lot of hats.
And no chicken skin whatsoever.
Exactly, just like I said, it's not, yeah, it's like dental work.
Yeah, I know, it's okay.
Yeah.
But thank you for
Sure.
explaining that. I have always wondered that. When you are casting, you've talked about a couple of the films that you were looking for one person in particular and how you find them. Are you usually going through an agent, or are you going through other connections?
Yeah, I think, you know, going through anything. So I would say that I use a casting director. I've used casting directors here for years. I use a casting director now, Katie Doyle, who has a very broad range between her knowledge of the local market and her knowledge of those who are fitting into the theatrical films that come into Hawaii to shoot. More importantly, she's a performer. She comes from the stage. So there's nothing better than her. You know, again, it's that wearing different hats or having different experiences. She's able either to prep an actor so they give you their best audition. She's able to help guide. She can interpret. If we're looking for something specific, she knows how to speak to an actor to get that, so we see it in an audition. She reaches out to the talent agents, and we get lists of things. But at the same time, I think anyone who is involved in these types of projects, certainly for the Hawaii market, I mean, last night at HIF, I'm there to represent the fishing club, but because there are 4 other Hawaii shorts, I'm busy scribbling notes in the dark about who I liked and trying to remember either a performance, a moment. You know, a director, you're always looking for who you can collaborate with in the future, whose talent is ready.
Yeah.
Where can I pull from?
Okay.
So it's an ongoing process.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you came here, the first project that you worked on here in Hawaii was Picture Bride?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, first big project.
And yeah, that must have been interesting because you didn't have a lot of contacts.
Right. And I think
And
it's
part of so much of the job is contacts.
Yeah, I think that was really a trial by fire. But again, it really gets back to the material itself. Such a strong story, such an emotional story, something that meant so much to the community at large. So at some point, understanding the foundation built by Kaio and Diane Mark, our producer, Lisa Onodera, our producer, understanding that foundation, it was then easy to kind of fit into that slot. And at the same time, then when I went to shake hands and say, I'm Danna Hankins, I'm the line producer of Picture Bride, there was almost a kind of validation that came with it, because I think even if no one knew who I was, if I was, you know, right off the boat, there was the understanding that I was behind and backing this project that meant the world to everybody involved. And I think that in a way, that spoke to the crew who needed to figure out how to fit me in, the vendors, you know, the supporters, just at large. It was the best invitation or the best guest list I could have been put on, was to be asked to be a part of that project.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think then that led the way to, you know, to the other things, so the other projects.
I kind of got into a similar situation when I came here as managing director
Right.
of Kumukuhua Theater.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're here for that.
Right.
Then here's all these wonderful people who
Yeah.
are going to
There's a
work with
validation
you
that
on
comes
that.
with it as well. They know your heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then where did you go? What happened after Picture Bride?
So after Picture Bride, I jumped into trying to pull together those short stories into short movies, and at some point, reaching out into the talent community. I mean, I find myself working with Dan Secchi as Grandpa in Under the Blood Red Sun, but I worked with Dan probably 18 years ago in The Lemon Tree Billiards House, also directed by Tim Savage. So you find yourself at some point coming back to either creative partners or talent partners that you've worked with before. There's something that I think, whether it's timing or whether I've just lived a charmed life, The Lemon Tree Billiards House, starred Ray Bumatai, the late great Ray Bumatai, James Grant Benton, Dancing with the Longbone at some point, great cast, Karen Kiave Hawaii and Henry Capono, True Love and Mimosa Tea, Carrie Tagawa and Elizabeth Lindsay. And then, of course, in The Fishing Club, it's an ensemble cast, but it does include Robert Kekaula and Kaylee E. Reichel. So at some point, it's very exciting to find that either I'm doubling back to actors that I've worked with before, or being part of allowing them to stretch their wings outside of what you and Kumakahua and the other theaters, certainly Diamond Head and Manoa and all of the theaters, Paliku, all of those do. Here's another opportunity, though, to allow them to stretch their wings in a way maybe they wouldn't have been given an opportunity, 20 years ago when I first arrived. So those projects have been terrific and special, and hopefully very soon I'll be able to get those up and out for streaming. I feel like I'm sitting on our cultural heritage in a way with these marvelous stories, and I need to get those up and out. And then moving on to Chief, which was a film that I did with Chief Cielo Avea. He's long known at the Polynesian Cultural Center originally, and Brett Wagner, the writer-director of Chief, which went on to Sundance in competition as a short film. Brett had seen Chief Cielo perform many years ago, thought a little bit about how unusual it was for a Samoan chief to arrive in the islands, the difference, the geographic difference between what he had grown up with, let's say, in Samoa and what he found here, arriving at Honolulu Airport with, the cars, the concrete. And he did a fabulous screenplay, short story, fabulous screenplay, which throughout the years, again, everything takes me quite a while to get it mounted and going, but we found the funds in order to pull together a short film, and I will never forget the day Brett stood and knocked on the door of my office and said, "We got into Sundance." Oh. So it was, again, very charmed, magical moment, but great talent. And Chief Cielo, who had no experience on camera, I mean, he had just very similar to Kaylee E. Reichel, entertainer in his blood, knows his stuff, knows how to perform, but then putting him in front of a camera and then asking him to temper that art in a different way. It's another magical performance.
Amazing to watch.
Yeah.
It must be. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off here. We're going to come right back. We're going to take another quick break. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard talking with Dana Hankins. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel, CEO of ThinkTech. On Thursday, December 11th, we're having our annual reunion party. We call it ThinkTech United. It's at the Laniakea YWCA. It's for our speakers and hosts and moderators and friends. Please come down. Everybody is invited to be united. We'll see you there. Check our website for details. Aloha.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard, talking with film producer Dana Hankins. And first of all, I want to back up just a little bit. When you said that you had approached Honolulu Magazine about their short stories, is that something that you had done before, or you had seen done before, or you just were inspired to do?
Certainly inspired by the stories. From the years in LA, I knew that I needed to go after whatever material I was interested in. Certainly through those years in LA, you're tracking down magazine articles, you're finding writers, you're finding, you're developing material. So it was nothing to me to reach out to Honolulu Magazine. It was harder to try to explain that I was interested in making a short movie, a short film, because again, at that time, and this goes back 22 years ago, what we were seeing here was documentaries and oral histories, which are fabulous, but I wanted to entertain with a different type of tale, and that had to come from fictional material. So in reaching out to them, I think, you know, a little bit of hesitation trying to understand what that is, and it's similar to the hesitation we found with Under the Blood Red Sun. You read it, you understand it, then you try to explain you're going to make a movie out of it. How are you going to adapt it? Are the boys going to do this? There's a little bit of singing and dancing that even a producer has to do to try to best explain what direction you're heading with any project. And you have to do that. You have to start with the cast. They need to trust you. Certainly the crew, vendors, supporters, organizations have to trust you. And then at some point, however you're finding the funds to make the project, you're singing and dancing for money. You're trying to explain what it is that you want to do, why, and how ultimately they're going to see their financial return.
Yeah. Are filmmakers in Hawaii making money?
I think some are. You know, I'm encouraged by they're almost the founding production companies, Island Film Group, Talk Story Productions, just knowing that they saw an opportunity many years ago through a tax credit in order to found companies here that are working in production. And I think at some point, you know, even smaller companies like myself, there are a number of different avenues that we're able to pursue. Hard for me to define because there are so many different companies and there are so many avenues, but you know, I take my lead from those that I've learned from, and certainly with Island Film Group and with Talk Story Productions, I've enjoyed working with both of those companies, have learned much, and have taken my lead from how they have conducted their business.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear about so many smaller projects and all of the heart that goes into it, and I wonder, a lot of times we as artists do things for the love of what we're
Yes.
doing, and it is sometimes very difficult to know when to draw that line because you really want to do this.
Right.
You know, which leads me to my next question. I wanted to ask you, what is it, there's so many different facets of this that you work in. What is it that makes you, you know, sort of time stand still for you and you realize, oh my gosh, it's 10 o'clock at night and I haven't eaten?
Right.
You know?
I think similar to what you've described, certainly at this age, with all of the work that I've done over the years, I have to be completely enamored, in love with what I'm doing in order to work 24/7 and have my head in that project all the time. And that's certainly the case now with Under the Blood Red Sun. I think to some degree, having 20 years of experience with moving it from pile to pile, in terms of having Sandy, the author, you know, revise and polish and make changes. But I do think, you know, at some point it's also seeing it come alive. We have a fabulous cast, as I mentioned, Kyler Sakamoto, Kalama Epstein, who plays Billy Davis, Autumn Ogawa, Mama Nakaji, Chris Tashima, Dan Seki, I could keep going.
Will Kahele.
Will Kahele, forgive me, Will. So at some point, seeing that cast, now all of a sudden it's almost like they have become my family, and you know what that's like when you have family members and you feel, you know, I owe them so much for such wonderful performances that it's easy enough for me to work 24/7 just to know that I'm finding the audience for the movie, and at the same time I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Sandy, to Graham Salisbury, for trusting us and allowing me 20 years to figure out the best way to bring this to screen. So I think all of those things, they're really important, and I just have to be in love with something before I take it on. I mean, at this age, I have to be in love with something.
Sure. Is there anything else you would do? Like I said, when I first started college, Bob Britton said, if there's anything else you could do, go do it. What would you do if not this?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'd probably want to, you know, lead international tour groups around the world. But I think at the same time, while I love to travel, I wouldn't give it all up for this. There's no, I mean, I also think at some point, with the kind of experience and with too many things I've learned over the years, that, you know, fate kind of helps you find what you're best at. And I think that the kind of multitasking, the nurturing of cast and crew performance, I wouldn't give any of it up.
It sounds like you are made for it.
Yeah, I think so. Didn't know that going into it, but I'm happy it made its way to me.
So now wait a minute, what are you like at home? Because I imagine you have your hands in so many of the little, you know, little pies that make up the big pie. At home, do you just say, I don't care, whatever?
No, I think, you know, gosh, I have a very, you know, patient family, and I think if you interviewed some members of the crew with young twin redheaded daughters who went to La Pietra, grew up here from age 2 to 20 or 2 to 18, any crew member will tell you that any conversation with me about when is my call time, what equipment do I need, what do I need to do, those calls were always interspersed with, can you hang on a second? Emily, stop pulling Molly's hair. I need you there at 8 o'clock. So there's a fair amount of multitasking. Again, it gets back to almost that Sybil, which is being able to conduct business, hopefully with someone who's patient enough to understand they need to hold on a moment while I'm trying to take care of kids with a husband who's out on a submarine. Oh. So those are all, you know, you kind of roll with those punches, and I think with the grace and patience of our crew and our vendors and supporters, they come to expect that from me.
Yeah, well, they need that from you. Yeah, and you know, someone with your job description could easily be the perfect archetype for that. Could be a control freak, but you seem like a much more nurturing person than a controlling person.
Thank you. I think I've learned that from everyone I've worked with, so I don't take credit for any of it. It's actually been, maybe it's been given to me by the talent and, you know, crew supporters and et cetera, who have molded me into what they'd like to see in a producer. So I think at the same time, you know, there's a fair amount of give back. There's a fair amount of things that I've learned from those that I've worked with. I thank them for it because it makes me stronger.
Yeah, those you respected, that you brought what you could from. We just have a couple minutes left, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, real quickly talk about, you've seen so many changes in the industry over the last 20 years, and we're getting to the democratization of filmmaking. I mean, where do you see things going, or is there anything exciting on the in the future that you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to continuing to make projects like Under the Blood Red Sun that might not be receiving Hollywood or studio support, but they are worthy of a movie, they're worthy of an audience. I mean, one of the things I've looked at, and we're at screenplay stage right now, is another of Sandy Salisbury's books, Night of the Howling Dogs. Love the story, based on a true story. And I think, you know, at some point, being able to produce big screen, or let's just say big stories for smaller budgets, because of that democratization, because of the disruption in terms of where we're getting our entertainment from, the thought now that with the press of a button we can access, you know, you name it, we can access anything on any device we have. That to me is really exciting. Sitting at the HIF screening last night and then talking with one of the ACM professors, afterwards, it's really exciting to me to see where we were 20 years ago, the kinds of short films we were making, and how we've progressed, how the students have progressed in the years. There is a, you know, creatively, production, visual, entertainment value, much more professional movies than I remember seeing years ago. So it's exciting that with handheld devices, with smaller cameras, with better lights, you know, with better support, it just seems as if the entire industry here is matured. It's now benefited from the Hollywood films that have come in and have offered up different skills, different approaches. We have, many of us have worked on those. We have embraced them, taken from them what we can, but at the same time turned them into Hawaii stories, things that are set in the islands that mean the most to us. And that to me is very exciting where we are right now.
Oh, thank you very much. And that's the perfect wrap up for the show. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I hope to talk with you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
And absolutely next time and Graham hinted at what project was coming up next. So you opened it up. When you're ready, come back and talk about that. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here with us. I would like to thank a few other people. I would like to thank Zuri Bender, who is our production manager in my ear. I would like to thank Sachi Slomov, who is our stage manager and also helps out with our communications, along with Chrissy Goffigan, and Jay Fidel, who somehow manages to put it all together. Thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you again next week on Center Stage. Bye.